Mike Isaacson, who will introduce
Hi,
us.
as you can tell, these are very informal events, i.e. we're making it up as we go along. Hi, I'm Mike Isaacson, the Artistic Director and Executive Producer, and very happy you're here. We've been doing these, I guess we call them artist spotlights, this sort of conversations with some of the luminaries who are part of the Muny family and work on stage, backstage, and then at the end of the season, our geniuses in marketing are going to use these to share with the world. Because one of the things that I have found that is so true, in my 13th season, and one of the beautiful things about the Muny is I'm open to what it teaches me each season, because it is a big idea, it is a big mystery, it's a big thing, and so this is not one thing. And I discovered a couple of years ago, by really paying attention, there were certain artists, people on stage where I could just feel the audience connecting to in a way that just went beyond the performance. And they tend to come back, or I invite them back because the audiences love to be a part of that journey. And Adam has been here before. He was a brilliant Benjamin Franklin in 1776. And then he played Herbie in Gypsy against his then almost fiance, then fiance, now wife, Beth Level, which was who is me too. Also a noted Broadway actor. So we're just going to spend some time talking, and then I'll invite questions, and we'll see where this goes. I want to begin. I set him up a little bit.
Can I say that there's no pressure here, only that this is the man who interviewed Stephen Sondheim, so I hope it goes as well.
Me too. I set him up a little bit on the way down here because the reviews have started to come out today, and I said, actors can be very specific about reviews. I don't want to know anything. And so we're walking over, I'm like, so what do you want to know about reviews? He's like, I read everything. I said, great. So I just want to read you two excerpts. Adam Heller embraces the role of Tevye with love and devotion. He is Papa the father of 5 daughters who make us feel every kind of parental emotion. He is also a milkman who supports his family by selling milk and cheese from a wagon. Tevye's simple world is first rocked by his daughter's desire to marry someone of their own choosing rather than forcing them to follow tradition and marry someone arranged for them by the Yenta. Heller's rich baritone voice and ability to connect with the audience makes him the best Tevye I've ever seen. I could go on. They are all that. One critic calls your performance a revelation. So
They're all on my payroll.
Yeah. So I want to begin. So the roots of this production is, I have a relationship with Adam, an artistic relationship we have to the theater, and also this production's director, Rob Gero, who's done incredible work, over 10 shows here. He did last season's West Side Story, if you saw that. And those two have a relationship. They did a production of Fiddler a decade ago at a very small theater in Connecticut, the Goodspeed Opera House, if you know about musicals, that did that. So when we announced this, he kind of called me together. Rob called and said, look, would you consider us, because we've learned so much in our lives and everything, this being the core of the Muny production, and I said, I'm so grateful, yes. So I want to begin with, you played Tevye 10 years ago, you're now doing it on the Muny stage. What is different for you? What is different for the show? Tell us about that journey.
Well, first off, the Goodspeed stage is about the size of this room, maybe a little bit wider, broader, but so it provides, a certain opportunity to take a musical that was built big and telescope it in and find the values of this amazingly rich story. I mean, there's a reason why I think so many have referred to it as a perfect musical, because it feels like that to me. But then the opportunity, acting is one of those professions where you get better as you get older. The more experience you acquire, the richness of your life informs the work And so revisiting this was an unusual and great opportunity to take all of what I've learned in the 10 years about living and pour it into this remarkable role. And then to do it at a theater like this, on this scale, with the ideas that are so large and universal, and speaks to everyone outside of our faith, and it's why it's, I think, lasted 60 years. To do it at this scale, at this theater, that is remarkable to its artists. We've been kidding, and Jill, who plays Golda, says that this theater is the Canyon Ranch of theaters. And it is, because any need you may have is addressed and taken care of, and so we feel remarkably held, so it's been great. And there's an assembly of actors here that there's a trend in casting now where you have to be sensitive to whose story certain musicals belong. And this is obviously a very Jewish story. And so I know that this theater went to great pains to cast primarily Jewish actors. There are a few exceptions, but I think we relate to this story in, someone has said, I feel the Ashkenazi coming out through my toes. And it sort of feels that way. I'm not an especially religious person, but I have an abiding identity, culturally and otherwise. So I step into this part. I analyze the text. I see where I fit, and it's almost effortless. It just feels like I can just exist here in the show. So that's...
When you began re-entering the script for this production, you talked about the decade. Can you think of a particular line, a moment, a scene, or some aspect of Tevye where you went, oh, I understand that now because I now, anything come to mind?
Well, in the 10 years, my parents were great theater lovers and great supporters of mine, and they have now passed. And I think of them a lot when I do this. This was an album that passed on our turntable at home growing up, that original cast album. So I think of them often when I do this now. And, I miss them terribly. And there's just something, you mentioned this to me when we were in the planning stages. You said that something remarkable is going to happen when you go out there and you have these conversations with God, and you are literally looking at the moon. And the moons this week have been extraordinary, full, and they rise up in this way that, Ziegfeld couldn't have staged better, and so it has it's a great opportunity, I think, this theater, to be able to have those conversations. And, every time I talk to one of the kids on stage, I feel, that obligation to provide an incredible amount of support. And even if it bends me like a pretzel, and it does, because they ask things of their father that are extraordinary and, to his way of thinking, very hard to square, but there's a way through for him until there isn't. But I think
one of the things you'll see this, and I said to him, and Adam is a fascinating artist. He also did Chicago here twice, who, when I see them in their rehearsal process, and we have a very fast rehearsal process here. From day one you're here through day 7, the entire show has to be essentially emplaced. Then there's 2 intense days of detail work, and then we go into 2 nights of tech rehearsal. So it is rigorous. And what's fascinating about the process is watching, I mean, because this role is Herculean. I mean, this is one of the great, if not the great male musical theater role. It's probably this and Harold Hill. And the truth is, Harold Hill does the same thing all night. And at the end says, oops, I tripped. No, but this has such layers and growth that it is mammoth. And what the iconic aspect of the part, was that at all daunting to you at any point, or do you just go at it?
I think when I began to look at it, I thought, how do you step into Zero's shoes or any of the other fabulous performers like Topol? No, the fun of it is to take something that is so well known and classic and make your own choices and go your own way and see what comes from that effort. And Rob is pretty magnificent that way, in that he doesn't want to just make those choices that seem safe, or they worked on another production, so we'll do it here. It's never that way. With him, he works on these musicals like he would work on a play. And so that's a great opportunity, because then it's not received wisdom. It's not like, oh, this works, this is where this laugh is. You don't do any of that kind of work with him. You kind of get to explore it with this community of actors that's never been together before. And out of that comes something fresh, I think.
One of the fascinating truths of the history of Fiddler, the original show, if you know anything about it, it was Bach and Harnick, it was Joseph Stein, it was Jerome Robbins, and Zero. And first of all, you had a conflict between Jerome Robbins and Zero Mostel, because Robbins had named names to the House Un-American Committee, and Zero hated him for that. But here was your director, so you have this sort of tension that was sort of built in. And then Joseph Stein, who wrote the book, was formerly a Borchfeld comedian. These guys wrote.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So but as a team, they were afraid of the show's Jewishness. They were afraid how the audience was going to respond to this. So the comedic elements, many were there to sort of say to the audience, "You're going to be okay. You know, here's this thing you know." And what's interesting in this production, you'll see, like, there's an exit at the end of the show. There's this beautiful thing when the characters are saying goodbye, and there's an exit for Yenta, the matchmaker. And it's quite moving in our production. But if you listen carefully, you can literally hear the beats of where the laughs are supposed to be. But our actor just moves through it and makes this slow exit, and Jill, who plays Golda, just turns and watches her dear friend leave forever. And I just want you to pay attention to the silence you hear in the audience during this moment. That what Rob and Adam and everybody have done with this production, and it's really lovely to read that, and you'll feel the audience recognizing it. There was just a human truth to it. And we begin with a milkman who's a father, and one of the things I want you to pay attention to, when you watch Adam when he comes out, and I've said this to you, and I've never seen this on the Muny stage before, and I've seen many extraordinary performances. He comes out, it's Tevye, he gets infants applause, it's very lovely, and he begins. And you literally feel the audience within minutes be like, this is my friend. I'm spending a night with my friend, and then my friend's heart gets broken. My friend, it is just so remarkable, the tenderness. And there's 10,000 people. But the intimacy, and I want to know you as an artist, as a craftsperson in your career, how did you develop that skill?
Well, that emerged from a conversation that I had with Rob when he suggested that if, as an exercise, it would be interesting to see how it would affect me if I considered that there was a moment, doesn't exist in the play, but if these Anna Tefkins decided that this opening of the show was an opportunity to introduce ourselves to people we don't know, and who was among the villagers who was elected to be that person, to be their guide. And so it sort of suggested that it was essential to choose that person who would most likely be able to make that connection. And so that sort of opened up the idea of that need to communicate and to bring people in and to tell our story.
I'm going to open up for any questions here. I sort of stop. Anyone? Anything? Yeah.
I did see it on Friday night, and it was absolutely amazing, exactly what you talked about. And when his daughter married out of the faith, oh my God, I mean, we just felt the tears well up, like you could feel it was just amazing.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
It was a beautiful show, you know. And I liked it, though I was a rich man, I felt it.
Yeah, no pressure there, right?
It was my father's song that he sang through the house with the record, yelling it through the house.
Oh, that's so great.
Well, we've also, it's funny you talk about your father, because we've been talking about this in the production stuff. Guys love Fiddler on the Roof. It's the guys' musical. No, seriously, my brother, who's not interested in anything I've ever done in my career, is like, yes, Fiddler. Like, no, but it is very powerful because it's the responsibilities of manhood. It's the responsibilities of fatherhood. It's that struggle of, I'm being looked on to provide, and I'm not, and I'm yet, you know, like all these things. It's fascinating. It's really loved by fathers. And they played the album a lot. Any other questions? Great, I'm gonna dive back in. All right, give us you were 5 years old and suddenly you were singing and we went, oh my God, like tell us your story. How did you?
So I grew up for the first 10 years of my life in Englewood, New Jersey, the son of a computer scientist and physicist, because computer science was a very emerging field then in 1960. And my mother was sort of had this dual track of being an art teacher and an interior designer. And her father was an accountant named Hyman Levine, and he loved the theater. And his favorite performer was Ethel Merman. And he would not miss a single performance of hers. And he took us to the theater. And, you know, you got the greatest seats. And it was a family event, and it always was. And theater was something that they shared with us. And I was a ham. You know, I mean, I'd dance around the living room, I guess. And they, you know, constantly played those albums, those original cast albums. Fiddler among them, and I don't know. I guess the older I got, the more performative I became, and I realized I had a singing voice, and that I could explore that and take that to school and sing in these clubs, glee clubs, and then I got that first laugh. Every actor will talk about that first laugh that he receives from an audience, that crack, that we refer to them as Neil Simon laughs. And when you get them, you become addicted to them, and you want to do that again. And how do you do it? And so, you know, I got into a lot of the school shows, but I loved the actors. You know, I loved those people who could do both things, who could sing a song but remain sort of true to the values of the moment. Like, Len Carey was a magnificent example of somebody who does that. He was the original Sweeney Todd, and I just loved how great a singer he was, but how he never let the circumstances of the moment elude him for greater glory or something. He never just stood center stage for the sake of ego. It was always in service of the story and of the acting. And I liked the idea of trying to, play with that suspension of disbelief. How much authenticity could you bring to a moment that is obviously artificial? Who sings in the most important moments of dramatic moments in their life? Don't do it. But musicals give us permission to do it, and so I just sort of admire people who do that, and I guess I wanted to try the same thing.
So you just moved to New York, began auditioning?
We moved to Long Island when I was 10. My father was the chairman of the computer science department at SUNY Stony Brook, and so we lived close enough to the city. We still made trips into the city. My parents, my brother was also a huge theater fan, and we would make trips into the city frequently. And I studied theater at NYU, and I moved there for college and was there ever since, until the pandemic, when Beth and I just said, I guess we should see what else is out there. And now we live in Rockland County, New York, in a beautiful little riverfront town, and it's a nice life, and we're very happy there and close enough to make the journey into the city when we have to.
What was your first Broadway show?
I think it was Fiddler on the Roof. I do. I think I was very young. I think it was Herschel Bernardi, and I think I may have been as young as 4. And it was one of my grandfather's gifts to us, and we saw that. And then I think the second one was a Kander and Ebb musical called The Happy Time, with Robert Goulet, who was one of those guys who had that extraordinary voice, but wasn't that kind of actor. But still, you kind of understood what the force of a great voice did for you, and how it was thrilling nonetheless. And
David Wayne, Michael Rupert.
David Wayne, that's right. Rupert.
Yeah. And what was the first Broadway show you were in?
Les Miserables, which you started here this season, which was extraordinary. And, again, it's all about parents and children, because, I just felt that was a great sort of return of gift that I could give to my folks, to say, your hunch wasn't a bad one. They supported me fully, and there I was, and it was a thrill.
Any other dream parts you've yet to play?
Give that a little thought. Somebody talked about the band's visit being an interesting opportunity.
You just did a year and a half on Broadway, the original cast of Some Like It Hot.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
That was a great show. Should have lasted longer. But these things, you never know.
Yeah.
What makes something into a hit.
So that show, to talk about his stuff, is talk about the style of comedy you had to inhabit for that.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that show was anchored by Christian Borle, who I think is one of the great comic geniuses that exist in musical theater today. He's also a dear friend of mine, and he wrote that show as well. I mean, others are given credit for it, but at a certain point, they had to move on to other projects, and Christian stepped in like the hero that he was. And in rehearsals for that show, he and his writing partner did this, talk about Herculean. I mean, he was in the show, and he was constructing the show at the same time.
So I worked with Christian on Legally Blonde, And Christian also directed here at the Muny. He directed Footloose here and everything. And word was out, Christian was rewriting the show. It was so show business. And I go to a big theater hangout, Joe Allen's, one night just to grab a bite, and I look literally over in the corner, like it was so old school. He and his writing partner are on like a computer, and I'm like, oh my God, they're rewriting the second act. And I just didn't, and he suddenly looks up and I'm like, go do it.
It really was that way.
Yeah.
I mean, extraordinary because, Casey Nicolau was the director of that, and his shows are built in rehearsal and previews.
Yeah.
I mean, he says, I need this moment. And, Matthew Lopez, wonderful writer, and he created the structure of that show, the architecture of it. And Christian and Joe pretty much hewed to that structure. But Matthew had other projects to do and couldn't be with us every step of the way. And that's when Christian and Joe stepped in and they did this magnificent show.
Turning it back around to Fiddler, again, I don't know if you know the history of the original show, but it was a disaster out of town. Almost closed, got terrible reviews. It was in Detroit and then DC. And it's a really famous theater story of the director, Joan Robbins. They had the first preview. It was a total disaster. So what you do is immediately everybody went to the bar. And Austin Pendleton was in the original cast, and Joan Robbins was a nightmare of a human being. Everybody was scared to dinner. He figured, well, we're going to close, so I'll be courageous. And he walked up and he said, Jerry, what are you going to do? And there's a long pause, and he goes, I'm going to fix 10 things a day, every day. And he began rewriting, and new songs went in, and all that. And even the original Fiddler, I sort of write this in the notes this week, similar to the Les Mis, the critics didn't know what to do with it. The public embraced it immediately. It was this immediate, just huge hit of people clamoring with tours and the whole bit. It just had that connection. You live in the craft of that show every night. What do you think of the craft of the show?
Oh, it's built like a Sherman tank. It is so solid. There's a reason that high schools do it. It just has this beautiful organic life. It starts in this welcoming way, and you recognize all of these relationships. They're all developed beautifully and introduced beautifully. And the comedy is at its fullest and ripest in the first act, and that earns the second act, which goes to a much darker place. But because of that first act, you can do that second act. I don't know that if it weren't for Joe Stein's Borscht Belt background, if it would be, as effective that way. The songs are beautiful. Jerry Bach, the composer of this, everyone talks about Sheldon, and he was a brilliant guy, and he was the lyricist, and he lived to almost 100 and died last year. But it's Bach that, those melodies are so fundamental, and they hit you. And it's the reason that every, Jewish wedding does sunrise, sunset. It's necessary. Everything is necessary in the show. It's remarkable.
That's a beautiful place to end.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.
We're so grateful to Mike and Adam. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Rabbi Brad, of course, the bar is still open, food, bathroom.